The hottest topic in American soccer right now, with under a month to go, the USL and the USLPA do not have a combined bargaining agreement. So to dig into the legal ramifications, what tactics we might see, whether a work stoppage is possible, we are now joined by the soccer lawyer Andrew Visnovsky, senior counsel at Vellawood. Welcome back, Mr.
It's great to be back. How's it going?
Look at it, Andrew repping his town there. All right, let's start with the basics here, Andrew. Nothing has happened as far as we can tell. That means these two sides are closer to an agreement than they were months and months ago, even before the agreement expired. So, what's your current reading, based on what we can know? Your current reading of the situation between the USL and the USLPA?
It seems to me they're still a little bit apart on their numbers. And I think the toughest part for USL is that they are growing at an incredible pace, and that is a great thing when you are a business. It is a terrible thing when you're doing labor negotiations and you're trying to set a precedent where you're trying to keep jumps in salary and employee costs down. And so it's very hard for them to argue and justify, hey, we're not making a whole lot of money. We don't have a lot of money coming in when they're flush with cash. There's tons of very wealthy owners coming in, and they're talking about expanding into the first division, not even talking about it, like announcing that they're going to. And so that puts them in a tough spot in terms of, a lot of times these leagues will like argue that they're poor and that they're not making enough money to sustain themselves, and so they need to keep the numbers down. And so that's really tough for the USL. On the player side, it's tough because they're sort of bumping up against the American minor league system and the international soccer system, where minor leagues and international soccer are basically treated essentially the same in terms of labor as the first divisions. And so they want something that looks more like that, right? And they want to make it so that the transition and the difference between their leagues and the first division leagues is much more narrow, which makes their request for a big jump harder. There's been discussion about the players having made a lot of concessions in the first negotiation just to have it. I think the first negotiation was right on the heels of COVID as well. And so they made, according to them, made big concessions based off of the idea that they were going to expand and get a bigger jump later. And so I think that's where the impasse is that they were expecting this big jump in pay and in benefits, and the league wants to take a much more stepped approach, I think is the language the league has said. So something like more akin to like a normal jump in pay and benefits and stuff like that than the big jump that the USLPA wants.
So in a situation like this seems like a kind of unusual situation. It seems like both parties at the negotiation table are both somewhat vulnerable. Obviously, the players, they're not on NBA style contracts, and they don't have millions of dollars to just, sit on until they get the deal that's 100% what they want. But also, you laid it out that the league, the management side, are in a vulnerable position. They have big plans, big expansion, but maybe light on funds. So who has the upper hand in these negotiations?
I mean, I think it's hard to say. I think the players have a little bit more leverage than, say, the MLSPA would, relative to the league and the ownership, only insofar as their league is much more bound by domestic players and players within their current player pool. And so MLS can kind of say, hey, we're going to bring in ringers, we're going to bring in international players if things get really bad, right? If we get into like a replacements level situation, the replacements in MLS are players from abroad, players outside the league, and then lower division players. USL doesn't really have that because all of the lower division players that are available are in the USLPA, either in the championship or in League One. And I don't think that League One players that are in the union are going to cross a picket line and take a job. So then what does that player pool look like for replacement players? I don't know. It's semi-pro guys. It's recent college graduates. It's pulling guys out of college, I guess. They can't really go to the international market.
Well, so let me just pause you there for a second, Andrew, because I think the natural question to ask off of this is if it does go in that direction and the USL starts looking at scabs, there's obviously going to be a quality drop-off.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you wonder if USL is calculating that maybe it doesn't matter as much for them that there would be a quality drop-off. I wonder if you have a sense of that.
I think that's a fair point. I think I mean, obviously the USL is closer to the floor than like the NFL is or the NBA is as well. And in minor league sports in America, the business model has always been sort of an entertaining night out, not necessarily a focus on the competitive side of the game. And so these lower league teams have like decent supporters groups and have supporters, but a much bigger chunk of their fans are casual people that might go to one or two games that don't really follow the team and won't really notice the drop off. And so like the thing that I really enjoy is not, I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but like find very interesting about labor negotiations is the push and pull of leverage for both sides is kind of is very much like a seesaw in that there's any bit of leverage that one side has usually provides some sort of leverage for the other side, if that makes sense. And so it's really fascinating to me. It's really a game of chicken, right? Like it's who's going to break first and who's going to deal, and that's the problem, right? Because these USL Championship players aren't making a whole lot of money, so they can't.
Right. So this is obviously what Rob was alluding to. So in order in this game of chicken, your nuclear option is strike on one side and lock out on the other, and you know, again, there's so much at risk for everybody that it seems very unlikely anybody will actually do one of those things, which then means what is the actual timeline on this, Andrew? Because they keep coming out with announcements about what they plan to do in the future. They're getting ready to launch their 2026 season, which on the back of that news should be a very big deal for them. And I guess as long as it's like we're not actually stopping this negotiation, we just continue on with basically no momentum in this process.
I mean, yeah, I think the 2026 and 2027 seasons for professional soccer teams in the United States are obviously very big, important seasons that they need to get right to maximize the benefit off of the World Cup and the hype leading up to the World Cup. I don't know. I think ultimately they will get something sorted out before the start of the season. I think neither side wants to have any sort of work stoppage. I think it'll be really tough for them, for either side to recover if they have to reschedule games or reschedule an off season or something like that, or even piece together some sort of replacement level games. But my feeling is usually these people push it to the wire and then both sides kind of break and concessions are made and people things net out and an agreement comes to pass. I think it's tough now because we're sort of cutting into preseason and off-season preseason training and the transfer window. The international transfer window can't be moved, and that ends in April. So they've lost a bunch of months during the off season to bring in players, and I don't think they can register players during a lockout. Register new players at least in the international market that they intend on keeping. Could be because it's a lockout. So my guess is that this is sorted within the next couple weeks. But it really it's sometimes it doesn't, and it's really hard. It's really hard to tell based off of how far they are apart. It's really hard for me to get a sense of how far apart they are. It seems like they get close, and then the PA will put out a statement and say like they're not treating us like the professionals that we are. And when that happens, then it's like, okay, well then how much longer do we have until we get?
Well, this is what I say every time we report on what the USLPA has put on their socials. What I say is, okay, this is, I mean, we can debate whether the level is elevated, but this is pretty standard stuff from the players' side. And the USL side, they're not going to say a word. It doesn't benefit them at all to be public with any of this. So when you look at the USLPA's post, indicative of we're not as close as maybe we thought they might be, is there anything in the character of the post that stands out, or is this pretty much boilerplate stuff?
To me, it seems pretty standard. I think the Players Association is always going to puff out their chest a little bit during negotiations and sort of stand firm on like, these are the things we want. We're not going to budge until we get them, until it gets to the point where they're like, oh yeah, we can live with that. I think it's also harder in negotiations like these because certain details of the CBA that in a higher level, in a first division league, an NBA or NFL, the details aren't like super important and they're not fighting over. But in a lower division where the salary is lower, that stuff is a bigger deal. I think the biggest thing is like healthcare and health insurance, and that seems like a really big topic of controversy in this round of CBA negotiation. And from my time working in the MLS league office and working with players and agents in MLS, like we have no questions about healthcare and health insurance.
Right.
Not even like a section of the CBA that I know very well.
It's a matter of livable. We're talking about a level. It's livable stuff for these players. Whereas when you talk about those big ones that we are very aware of, NHL, NBA, all that stuff, it's really just we deserve a bigger share of the mountain of money that you're making.
Exactly.
And that's not what's happening here, because nobody is under any illusions that there's a whole lot of money splashing about, which is definitely different.
Yeah, I mean, and so I think there's two sides of that, like money splashing around question. One is how much these teams are making, and the other is how much money is coming into the league through ownership and how much money the ownership has and is willing to invest in these teams. And if they're willing to invest money in franchise fees and stadium construction and all of that, when does that get translated into player salaries?
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Like you need a stadium to play in, understandable, right? You need to pay the franchise fees, understandable, but you also need players.
Yeah. And when the
soccer that you're selling,
franchise fees are going up by however incremental amount, then the question is, why isn't the player salary going up by that amount?
I mean, it's a tale as old as time. That management is always the first place they go to save money is labor. That's always the restaurant, soccer. It doesn't matter. You're always looking to cut labor. And I mean, never mind. I was gonna make a personal comment about my professional situation, but I'll leave that aside. So I guess we come back to this issue, Andrew, of the players are being asked to carry water for the owners until down the road things are better and you can get your piece of the pie to be a little bit bigger. Right? MLS players were sold this as well, and I guess it's really tough for it's tough as a fan. I think it's natural to fall on Labor's side. I think a lot of people are on Labor's side, but then there is that specter of, well, what if we don't have our team? What if my team's not playing this year? What if there are no games because the players, maybe righteously so, are standing up for themselves? At what point does it become, let's all, again, as I heard from so many MLS players over the years, you just got to do this because we're in this together?
Yeah, I mean, I think those questions are really real. I think in lower division soccer in the United States, those are even more real because there's a lot more frequently teams fold or go on hiatus or struggle to keep their doors open and struggle with revenue. And I think it is. I think there's always a time where labor and management need to come together and figure out what is best for the enterprise to keep the enterprise going long term. Because if the enterprise doesn't exist, employment can't happen with that enterprise. But it's also the way that the league and these clubs are thinking about things. And there's another layer of complication because the USL is set up in a way where the league is kind of a separate business entity from the clubs. And the clubs all have very different financial interests and motivations, both from each other and from the league. And so it's like almost the opposite of MLS, where MLS is like this big monolith. USL is kind of a bunch of different people wanting different things. But there's this question of how much you are willing to give, and then what is an untenable amount to give just for the sake of the longevity of the enterprise. I think it's a really hard question. I wonder how many MLS teams are in the black and making money.
Sure.
USL teams are making, like, their only revenue is gate revenue at this point. Mm-hmm. They're not selling shirts. Their media deals are almost non-existent, and I think those are locked up mostly with the league office. And I think the question is, like, how do we determine an investment in these teams, right? And it has to be an investment in players as well, because they're the reason why people show up. But as we know from the history of U.S. soccer, if you overinvest in players, the league itself can become unsustainable. Mm-hmm. But I will say, I think, given the level of wealth of people trying to get into North American soccer, the situation is very different from the NASL of the 1970s and the financial risk involved with those teams. I think if there's a person on ownership that has a B in their net worth at the beginning of the word after the number of their net worth, they can sustain a team paying players a decent wage and sustain losses for a very long time. Yeah. And it just depends on their level of commitment of what they want to do. But those people are not buying into, I mean, it is sort of like an ego game for them, but it's also they're buying into a business that they want to make money eventually. And I think that's the thing when we talk about labor and we talk about all of this that we kind of throw by the wayside, is that, like, the goal at the end of the day for all of these teams is to be a profitable enterprise. That's why they exist. That's why people are putting money into them. Yeah. And you have to be able to dig yourself out of the hole of the debt that you're building as well.
Yeah. This matter definitely getting into the heart. Are these community assets? Are these profit-driven organizations?
But keep in mind too that I think what you're seeing that this at the MLS level, right? It's maybe you want to make money just because anybody wants a profitable business, but you're also gaining equity in the value of your club that one day you can realize. So you may only be making money on paper until the club is sold, but you are eventually going to realize that money, which is happening, I think, starting to happen at the lower division level now, and will change the complexion of things pretty dramatically.
I think that's right. To build that value, you have to build up goodwill with the community, and the way you do that is by having competitive teams that win trophies, that have dynamic players that people want to go pay a ticket to go see. And so you have to balance the cost of doing that. You're not going to be able to charge an arm and a leg to go see a USL team in terms of like tickets and things like that. And so to get that return on investment, that equity benefit, you have to make the teams accessible, and you have to make the teams something that people want to go see, right? Because that's the only way the value of the team goes up.
Absolutely.
Because of that like price value is the concept of how much money, how well the team is going to make money in the future.
Yeah.
And so if you want to have that grow, you have to have something that's driving people into seats and in front of screens to watch your team.
Indeed. With under 3 weeks to go until the USL Championship season starts, it's supposed to start the weekend of March 6th and 7th. So under 3 weeks to go until games are supposed to happen. So we got a bit of a game of chicken. Who will blink first, or will there be a resolution? But Andrew Visnovsky, the soccer lawyer, thank you for breaking it down. We've wanted another voice in on this topic, and thank you so much for joining us and providing it.
No problem, guys. Thank you.